had like 400 people like put their names into the sign up list like on day one. It was
Damn.
overwhelming. I could barely speak after like just the first day because I
Yeah.
was, you have to speak loud enough over like the sounds of the crowd, and then repeating yourself, to say like, here's the rules of the game, here's the rules of the game, and over again for like 8 hours with no lunch breaks or anything. I ended up calling a friend and I flew him in. I was like, I need help. So I'm going to teach you how to play my game. You're going to help me demo. And, he has since been immortalized in the game as one of the characters in the expansion.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. This episode of the Want to Know More show it's actually brought to you by us, the Wicked Dicey team. We're just kind of doing the thing. If you got anything from this show, just make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps out, I think, I hear. Anyway, back to the show. Welcome to the Want to Know More show, the show where I ask folks fun questions about the world of gaming because I find it fascinating and I think you do too. I'm your host, Miles, and our guest today is Wisardly. And for folks who don't know you, could you introduce yourself and give everybody a 1-2 punch of what you do in gaming and kind of who you are?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Miles. So I'm the founder of ManaWorks Games, which is really just to say that this is my first board game company. And our first project is called That's Wizard. It's a card game about dueling wizards for 2 or 4 players. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that in a second. I started working on it about 6 years ago, and just now it's finally getting into production and getting out there for the fans.
6 years, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
It takes a while. I think I've heard about your game for at least 3 years of that 6 years from a mutual friend of ours, and I am so excited to see your game and in my hands in real life once you do go into distribution, which you haven't quite gone into yet, if I'm correct.
It's right on the cusp. So I have a contract with a manufacturer, and we are just finalizing the distribution terms in terms of like which type of shipping that we're going to be doing for getting things overseas. So lots of little things that I never thought I'd have to learn as just an aspiring board game designer, but being a solopreneur, is that the right word? Solopreneur?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's a word. We're going with it. I've had to learn all sorts of things like customs, tax laws, and all this other stuff, kind of like right at the last minute to get everything finalized. So it's a big jump from, designing cards and seeing if this is balanced and is this fun and working on the art. I love 90% of this process. This last 10% is a bit of a struggle, but it's worth it.
I love it. If you haven't run into the That's Wizard game at a convention or something like that, my quick understanding of it, and so I might butcher this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically two players or more playing these sets of cards where they have mana points, and you can play like an aggressive spell or a defensive spell, and it kind of goes around in turn order, and it's kind of like a duel in a way. Is that maybe encapsulating it?
Yeah, in fact, like the basic premise of the design of this game was that I didn't feel that there was any card games out there that really captured the fast-paced nature of wizard duels. That's something you might see in like Harry Potter, for instance, where they're just like slinging spells, blocking this one, then coming back with another one. That kind of fast-paced action. So the core mechanic of the game, as you said, is playing spells, of course. But the thing that's very different about it from something that's a larger game like say Magic the Gathering or something is it's a simultaneous action game. So both of you are choosing a spell or an action to play on your turn. You're setting in how much of your resource, like mana, which we actually call power in this game, how much you're going to use on that particular spell, and then you both reveal at the same time. And whoever has the lower number of power showing on this little dial that they have, then they get to read their card first. So the weaker spells are quicker than the more powerful slow spells. And this creates this very interesting dynamic of, well, if I go first, I might just win the duel because, maybe my opponent is really low on health or something like that. And also, because you don't know what your opponent is going to do in the coming turn, because it's simultaneous action, it creates this like, well, I know that they have this card because I saw them play it earlier in the round. Are they going to play it again? Is it time for me to play Counterspell, which is something that all players can do? You can kind of just block a spell at a minimal cost of your own health. So it becomes a very psychological game as you play, kind of like worrying about what spells your opponent is about to unleash, whether you should be on the defensive or the offensive. And it really captures what I think is like a really good interpretation of a wizard duel.
And spoiler alert, I really agree with you on that, because before I knew you, I had joined a sample game with you, and I played, and I was like, a lot of the audience that does watch this knows that I did like a lot of Harry Potter events at one point in my life, and we were always trying to come up with a game that was a duel, and so we kind of made like a rock paper scissors version of this. But when I played your game, I didn't tell you this, but I found the interaction, the rapid draw, like the counter spelling, the like knowing that they have this like, I don't know, snake spell or something that they could delete you with in one turn. I found that really fascinating, and I think you had also taken so much time to dial in one card against another, against another, against another. And so again, back to that 6 years that you've been doing this, it shows. And so I just like, that's, you know, now I know you're a friend, and I am a little biased here, but like before that, I still liked the game. And so for folks who are interested in this, before we kind of get into, I do want to like talk a little bit about that 6-year process, but just like really quick shout out for yourself, where if folks were interested in getting a dueling Magic game like this, that's Wizard, where do they even start right now? Because you're not distributing at this current exact time.
Sure. Thanks for asking. So we have a website. Made that myself as well. This is kind of a me doing everything sort of project. So that's wizard.com.
I have it. So here's your website. So that's Wizard. And these are the cards that you're talking about, right?
Yeah. This is currently, I think there might be one or two that needs to be updated. I have so many things on my to-do list, but that should be basically the release version of all the cards. And
I remember specifically playing this card. Sorry to cut you
the
off.
Death's card.
That was
sure. That's an exciting one. That's a real exciting one.
Yeah. And just as like a quick primer for everyone who hasn't played, kind of run me through this. So I know these are like the blue in the middle is like power points.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the card to the left of that one, Explosion. That's always the one that I kind of drag out to kind of demo to people, because it's probably the simplest card in the game.
There it is.
As you said, the numbers in blue represent the amount of your power. You know, some people might call that mana, that you're allowed to spend when playing the card. And if you read the effect of the card, it says deal P+1 damage to your opponent. So P represents the choice that you made of how much power you wanted to expend when playing the card. And what you can't see here is that the game comes with this little dial called a spell power dial. So you kind of set that dial to one of the numbers that's allowed on the card. Let's say you set it to 5. And then you reveal your dial and your chosen card at the same time as your opponent. So you kind of flip it over. You both spend the amount of power on like your resource tracking board, and then whoever has the lower number showing on their dial, they get to read their card first. So if we both cast Explosion and it was like towards the end of the game and I only had 3 health left or something like that, and you use 3 power and I use 5, you would get to read your card first, and maybe you finish me off before I even get to read mine. That's kind of how that works. And then there's some cards like that will last for a certain amount of time. Like this one has the lightning bolt icon to the right of the word Explosion, so it comes right back to your hand. There's no shuffling or drawing in this game like Magic the Gathering. You have 7 spells and you have them all in your hand at all times. And then there's some that have an hourglass symbol, and they kind of stay in play for a certain number of rounds. So yeah, the more power that you put into the confusion spell there, for instance, it says that it lasts for P-1 rounds. So if you put 5 power into it, it's going to stay on the board doing things for 4 different rounds. And that's tracked by little tokens.
Tell me about your art. I'm curious.
That was one of my favorite parts of this journey, honestly. Yeah. I didn't actually start with this artist. If you scroll through looking for one named Shock, might be at the bottom. That was the very first artist that I found, and it was kind of just like a one-off test. Like, yeah, that one there. how much would it cost for me to get art done from somebody on like Fiverr or something like that.
Yeah.
They used a pseudonym, like an artist name. I don't know how to credit them other than their name, Shunkiss. But you know, they're in the credits says that. And then after that, I found Jamie Noble.
Okay.
And we'll definitely link his stuff in the description of this video or something like that, because he is absolutely amazing. He did 99% of all of the other arts for these cards, and he has just captured such the perfect like style of serious when it needs to be, and then humorous when called for.
Yeah.
If you look for a card called Shrink, it is one of my favorite that kind of gets that humorous feel. Yeah, down here you have the tiny little miniaturized person and someone, you know, trying to step on him. It's just absolutely amazing work with Jamie. He is able to capture emotion and the humor, because this is meant to be a semi-humorous game, depending on the cards. So if you read like the flavor text of some of these cards, you know, we've put a lot of work into making them kind of humorous as well, and that's been fan driven as well. A lot of the flavor text comes from contests that we've had with the community over the years. So I can't take credit for half of that.
Wow. So on that note, you've got all this time spent. Actually, I got it before we leave that subject. I am very curious. So with each of these art, they don't give me a number, but like, are you paying per artwork on that, or are you like saying, hey, I've got a new series, the spring series that's gonna come out around the corner, / I need this for my new booth that I'm running at a convention. Like, how does that process work typically with artists that you like trust and love and respect? So
yeah, so I always recommend, you know, doing a sample first, right? You're not going to commit to like all 30 something cards with one person and then kind of regret it. So you start with one, kind of see their sample, and they will usually have a process where maybe you pay 50% up front. They do like a black and white kind of sketch. You kind of see the direction that they're going into, and then you can kind of see how amenable to feedback and changes that they are, and see if you're a good fit with working with them. That's one of the most important things, is really finding someone that is willing to work with you. And for me, you know, once I found Jamie, I realized, yes, this is the person that I want doing all of the art for That's Wizard. I basically just listed every single card that I wanted him to design as like, you know, an initial set. And I think that represented probably 75 of the cards that you see here all at once. And just kind of put my first thoughts as to, you know, what would make a good card. And some of it was very detailed, some of it was very vague, and a lot of it was open to Jamie's interpretation. So it was just like, I didn't do any drawings or sketches myself. I basically just wrote out with words saying, you know, I want a little guy looking like he's getting stepped on, right? And then Jamie took it from there. And that's the quality of, you know, a really good artist who can just make your vision come to life. Because I had given him examples to say, like, you know, I want the flavor to feel like maybe Harry Potter, where at times that's a very serious show. You know, it's lots of things are at stake, but also it's also kind of fun and like, you know, childlike and humorous at times, and it kind of encapsulates all of that into it. So that was kind of our starting point for inspiration.
How many cards are you up to so far that are
goodness.
For the release?
So let's see. The base game has
1 million. No.
1 million.
Yeah,
maybe someday.
like
maybe someday. We're not at Magic the Gathering level yet. That's for sure. So the deck building process in That's Wizard is that you choose 7 spells, and you'll notice that on the bottom right of each of these spells, they have a symbol and a number. And the way that deck building works is that if you want to get that level 4 called Shrink with that particular symbol on it, that represents a school of magic, that symbol. So you need to take the level 1, 2, and 3 before you can take the level 4 in that particular school of magic, that symbol. That particular school of magic that we're looking at is called Transfiguration. So it's all about transforming other people into other things. So if you look at the card before this one, it's called Polymorph. And it's about, you know, turning somebody into a chicken to kind of end the duel. You know, you transfigured them into a harmless chicken.
Yeah.
So there's 7 schools of magic. So we got, you know, 7 times 4, 28 core cards. And that's kind of what I had set Jamie out to do originally.
Okay.
Oh, actually, you know what? I take that back, because there's a funny story here. There was 6 schools of magic. And at one point, I was doing some math. I wanted to kind of put some advertising on the box, and I said, what, given the rules of deck building that I kind of just described to you, what are the possible like combinations and permutations? So like maybe I could put it on advertising, like over 1,000 possible ways to build your spell book, right? Well, I did the math. I double checked it on Stack Exchange, the math forums and stuff like that. And I had to double check because I do all these calculations with 6 schools of magic, and the answer was 666.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was the exact number of permutations that you could do. I'm like, I'm not putting that on the side of my box.
But I
or maybe I should have.
I think
I was trying to.
Yeah, I think it was a golden opportunity.
It could have been, but I wanted it to be a little bit more lighthearted,
Yeah.
right? So
that's your
if I
next
things
iteration coming out. You should have like the expansion set is the Heart of Darkness or something, and that equals that many card combinations. That's really interesting.
So I did add a 7th school of magic to bring the numbers up to like over 1,000, so that could be part of like the advertising thing. Since then,
Gotcha.
There's a expansion that is also being made in production as well, and those represent one-time use only cards where you get like a potion to drink. Once you drink it, it's gone. A familiar, maybe like a wizard familiar, like an owl or something. It has a one-time only effect, and then it's discarded from the game forever. So it's just something to kind of allow people to, kind of up their metagame, so to speak, in all of this. And now we also have promotional cards that we give out at conventions, which look for in the future. There'll be some Kickstarter exclusive things when that happens. So I think we're getting up there in terms of cards.
Yeah.
I think up to 70 something unique cards.
So, are your current marketing strategy, to my knowledge and understanding, and could be totally wrong on this, is you attend conferences and folks come by and sign up for you basically play like a demo game, and then they sign up for, I don't know, is my audio still working? They sign up for a demo game, and then they get onto an email list, essentially. Is that currently like the only way you're going about marketing, or is there some other things happening in the background?
That's the primary form. Kind of doing everything all at once is a bit hard to keep up with everything. So admittedly, I can't really run the best marketing campaign. Like I've used Facebook in the past. I've since moved kind of away from that. There are, paid advertisements, so you kind of like get your page out to see, so that people can see it, see a video, and then they think, what, this is actually looking really fun. I'd love to, join this Kickstarter kind of thing. So for many years, as you said, I was attending conventions and taking people's emails to be on a sign-up list, which, I'm not giving constant updates. I literally don't have time, unfortunately, for that. I wish that I did. But also people don't like spam either, so it could work out. I'm not sure. But yeah, over the years, we've got quite the number of people signed up, ready and waiting. And it's unfortunate that it's taken 6 years, but the 2020 events, pandemic and all that, it really set us back like 3 or 4 years, honestly. But I did use that time to like take a lot of feedback into consideration from fans, because a lot of people wanted it to be a 4-player game. So during those years where we were all kind of shut up indoors, I made a way that you can have 2 versus 2. So it's kind of like you're on teams of wizards. And there's a whole unique way of playing 4 players.
Is there a free-for-all version with 4 players at all? Like
No,
we
tested a lot of different iterations, including like 3-player, like where one person has to target the next person, like in a circle. We did free-for-all where you kind of choose your targets, or even 2v2 where you kind of like, choose who you're fighting. And in the end, what we came up with is that it's basically 2 people having their own match against the opponent sitting in front of them, with the exception that I've introduced 7 new cards specifically meant for 2v2s, where a spell might have an effect that affects both opponents instead of just one. And they're kind of like limited in a certain sense, so that there's not too many of those types of effects. But it creates that interaction that you're on a team. Maybe you can like take one of your turns to heal your teammate a little bit in lieu of like attacking the opponent in front of you. And then once you finish one duel, you kind of play the first team to get 3 victories individually. So you swap opponents after you've both finished your first duel. You kind of have to do that. And the other thing that kind of creates an interesting dynamic in the 4-player is that both you and your ally are sharing a deck of cards to build your spellbook with. Because the base game comes with 2 full sets of all of the cards that you were looking at on that page. But when you have an ally, if you've taken a card, then they can't take it. So you can't double up on the same exact spell. So it creates a very interesting team dynamic of, what cards are you going to take so that I can, maybe do something to synergize or take something opposite to kind of surprise our opponents. And it's turned out really well. It's got a lot of good feedback in terms of what we were able to do that was still balanced.
So pivoting a little bit and kind of talking about working with distributors and getting the game produced, can you tell me a little bit more about, like, is that the most aggravating process in the world, or is it just really easy to do? Because I feel like a lot of people who will end up watching this show, the Want to Know More show, is I feel like we all as gamers have this aspiration to create a game. Like, I have a box in my basement that has a bunch of chits and different drawings and all these things. Never got it anywhere. I'm not smart enough for that, but I did want to create a game, and so I'm curious, just being on the other side of it now. I'm like, I was like, that's just not my thing. I'm just not that's not. I'm fine not doing that. I'm curious what that looks like for you. That when you're in the hurricane of it all. How do you like even approach folks to produce your game?
So, I mean, there's a few different routes for people who are interested in this sort of thing. A lot of people really love the design process and like to stop there, so that they'll take their game in one format or another, might not even have finished artwork, but more of just like, here's the core mechanics and like little chits in your basement kind of thing, as you said. And then they might go to an existing game company and say, I would like you to see if you'd like to make this game, from this design. And you kind of sell your idea to them for some certain terms of profit that you both
also
share in some way.
No, I'm just kidding.
Possibly.
Possibly. Yeah.
Possibly. It's not ideal in terms of how much like revenue you would make as the designer. I think a lot of it tends to go towards the distributors because there is a lot of legwork involved after the design process. So I'm not saying that the design process is easy, but in terms of what the industry thinks of in terms of reward, is considered to be not exactly equitable to the other half of it, which is
really interesting.
Getting things produced and fulfilled. That's usually a larger percentage that is kind of taken. Now, for myself, I did not want to take that avenue. This was sort of a passion project for myself. It's not a career that I'm trying to use to create a living. This is something that I really wanted to put my name on and say, I was involved in every part of this process from start to finish, and I can also attest that, I've play tested the heck out of it, and if I were to give it to someone to produce, they might want to change a few things. And being a passion project, that was very important for me to kind of see it through from beginning to end, so that my vision, along with, what the feedback of the fans has been, is to me kind of pure. And that was very important. For demoing, once you have your idea, there's a great website called The Game Crafter, which maybe you're familiar with, but basically it's, I think it's over in Wisconsin. It's US based, and you can send them files, just regular images, and have cards printed, cardboard cutouts, anything. It looks 100% production quality. And because it's print on demand, like you can literally print one box, just full of all your game components, it is more costly, like by lots.
Right.
But that service is completely invaluable for going to conventions and play tests and having a product that is near finished. So that's a really good, strategy for people who are trying to get this in front of a publisher, for instance.
Or see it themselves in real life. Because I feel like the ideation stage is like, it's very nebulous. You're in the clouds. You don't even know what it looks like on paper. When you get it in front of you, I think there's a big difference there. And so once you have that product, like let's say you ordered your game from GameCrafter, I'm guessing you don't publish straight from GameCrafter because that costs a lot of money, right? You would find another way to produce it at an affordable cost, right?
Most people would choose that route. Yes, there are options at the Game Crafter where it can be like printed on demand. So like if you want to be selling product from the Game Crafter directly, you can put it up in their store. And if 5 people want to buy your game, they will have to pay that increased print on demand cost, but it is a legitimate way. If somebody is okay with spending $70 on my game, that's Wizard, they could order it from the Game Crafter if I were to put, the files public there. But most people don't want to be paying that amount. So it is, at this stage, a lot more affordable to find a manufacturer, usually overseas, and have things shipped out from there, so that everybody can kind of be happy with the price point.
And I guess how do you start that process? Like, that's what I'm very confused about. Is like,
sure,
how do you find somebody dependable and not gonna like rip you off? I guess is the first thought I would have in that process.
When I first started trying to research it, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I started by kind of looking at famous games and just looking up on the internet who manufactured.
That's so smart.
This game, right? And
didn't think about that.
Ironically, I think the first game that I looked up during 2020 was Pandemic, because we were in a campus, we were all playing Pandemic. So I was like, yeah, who made this? And it turned out to be a company. I think Panda GM made that, along with many other high profile games. So you kind of start from there and just see like who made what, and usually the internet has those answers. Even on the box, if you look next to the barcode, like vertically aligned on most games, next to the barcode is usually like a lot number or like a manufacturer name, so you kind of figure it out from there. After that, I wanted to take a more personalized route. So my mentors in the game design industry, shout out to Jason Maselli from Drop Drive and Dungeon Drop, Phase Shift Games. He's been an absolute gem of a person to just like kind of have these answers to all the questions that I have, having been in the industry for a while. And I currently went with a manufacturer named Longpack, based on a suggestion from Jason and many other people who are in my position, who are looking for like an affordable and easy to work with kind of individual. But the best choice for people who are doing this is to not just pick one company, is to get quotes from lots of different ones. And unfortunately, that process can take a while. It can take weeks or months to get an answer. You might have to fill out forms in a completely different way. You want to be very precise about things that you're submitting, like millimeters and weights and exactly what kind of paper you want to have. It's a lot of legwork. But much like working with an artist, I find that just as important as the price is being able to have confidence in who you're working with. That you, like when I went to PAX Unplugged last year to talk to manufacturers, because there was a number of them that were in attendance there. And I asked them, the general questions about my specific game, but I also asked them, I said, what are some mistakes that customers have made in the process with you, and how might I avoid those? And the reasoning for that was kind of twofold. One was to see, like, are they willing to admit that there was mistakes made, and if so, whose fault was it? And how did they help guide it? Or were they just like, hey, this is your problem, and, I already have your money, so forget that. Not that they're going to admit that, but you can tell a lot kind of the way people will answer. And, I think one of my favorite things about this industry, Miles, is that there's so many kind people in like indie board game design and manufacturing and publishing. Like, everybody seems so nice. And I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop and be like, oh, there must be some seedy underbelly of this. But so far, I just haven't seen it. Like, everyone is really nice and always willing to answer questions and help you out and try to get you to where they are. And kind of like bring each other up sort of feeling. And that in itself has been one of my favorite parts of this, 6-year journey.
Yeah. My joke on that, I talked about it with Brent from Grubertown. I was like, I think it's because this is the real world. And like when you're in real business, you have to like be cutthroat and you have to like hide behind, quotas and things like that. But like everyone in gaming is just like, we just want to have fun. Like we just like, why can't we just be like real and human? I say this all the time, but I like actually just, I kind of like rage quit my company I was helping somebody build, because I was just like, I just don't feel, I feel like the gaming industry has more happiness to offer, and like I don't feel like finance does. So anyway, I think there's a lot of good people in gaming, and I'm very glad to be here. So anyway, that's my little wrap on that. But yeah, so you piqued my interest there on one more other thing. And I don't want to take 1,000 hours of your time, because I do think I want to invite you back on the show at some point. And I say this to all the guests, like I don't, I think we should chat again. But you tell me about your convention and do you love going to Gen Con because you can sit in front of a booth and get 1,000 email addresses? Like what is the lay of the land out there? This is not like to plug our events. Like I'm not trying, because we're still kind of up we're trying to figure out our board game kind of side of things, but I'm curious to hear like what your 10,000 foot view of like the events out there are for your purposes.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I started very small, not knowing anything about anything. There was no art to my game the first year I brought it. It was like early 2017, and it was called the Connecticut Festival of Indie Games, and it was held in a gaming store in Connecticut. And it was a very unpolished game at that point. But I went again next year in 2018, where that same group, Connecticut Festival of Indie Games, was hosting at Kineticon, which is a massive like anime, video gaming, cosplaying kind of thing at Hartford in the convention center. And they kind of had their own little subsection where you could get a booth for very cheap through the subsidies of like the CT Fig people, which was very generous of them. And they had contests to kind of like give out awards, for up and coming games. And that was kind of when I realized, hey, I think I might actually be doing a decent job at all this, because my game won Best in Show. Like I had art from Jamie at that point, and also won Best Presentation. And everybody else who was part of the industry already, like the guys who make Dragoon, they were there demoing Life Siphon, one of their other games. They immediately came up to me to see like, hey, who's this new person who won Best in Show? And immediately started giving me advice. And it was just, wow, this is amazing. And then the next person would come up and say, oh, here's how I got started. And if you need any help at all, here's my card. So from Kineticon, I kind of moved on to Boston Festival of Indie Games as well, which is hosted by a group, through MIT and other things. And they're attached to a group called the Game Makers Guild, which is like a group of people who are very enthusiastic about playtesting each other's games. I brought my game there extensively in the early days to kind of like blind playtest, give them the rule book and see like, can they make sense of anything I'm writing? And oh my goodness, like my first day there, I went home, I was like, I need to rethink everything. I remember like everything was technically working, but at the time, my cards were all just like a sentence. And, people would look at the card and they would get it wrong. And I have to kind of, it was a blind play test. So I kind of have to stand there and like, bite my lower lip and like, oh, I want to correct something, but like I can't. So then afterwards, I'm like, oh, could you reread this card that I saw you misplay? And I realized at that point, people don't like to read. Nobody likes to read. People will get like the gist of things, right? People skim stuff. And so I started like using a lot of design principles to kind of draw people's eye to certain things, with saliency of, that's a graphic design kind of term, but like, to make people look at the important stuff, right? You put iconography where it's important so they kind of get used to it. You can put your text into blocks of text rather than long sentences and all this sort of stuff, I found out through Game Makers Guild. It was very pivotal. But before talking about conventions, after
that sounds
Boston,
like quite the training ground.
It is.
Shout out
I highly
to them
recommend GMG.
good stuff.
They are great.
Yeah.
Eventually, I moved on to getting into places like PAX Unplugged, and that was through the kindness of a group called Night Moves, which is over near Boston. They have a game store, and they always have a booth. And they're selling their games there, they sell, but they also have like a little section where you have rotating indie game designers kind of renting it out from them at PAX Unplugged. So you don't have to try to afford, a whole booth yourself for all 3 days when you're just an up-and-coming person with nothing to sell. You can kind of get a couple hours to like, get a part of that crowd, to get signups and stuff like that. And then I think the biggest event that I did before COVID kind of, shut down conventions for a while was PAX South, which I don't think is continuing anymore, but PAX South was in Texas.
It was just on their website the other day. I think they're doing PAX East, PAX West, Unplugged, and then they're doing like one more, but I don't remember where it is.
I don't think South is anymore, unfortunately. Because it was an amazing experience. They had a contest to kind of like submit your game, like a video, and they would pick out 7 showcase indie gamers, to be right in the center, like the absolute epicenter of the convention floor, with huge amounts of table space.
Wow.
So I was picked as one of them, and just had like 400 people like put their names into the sign up list like on day one. It was
Damn.
overwhelming. I could barely speak after like just the first day, because I
Yeah.
was, you have to speak loud enough over like the sounds of the crowd, and then repeating yourself, to say like, here's the rules of the game, here's the rules of the game, and over again for like 8 hours with no lunch breaks or anything. I ended up calling a friend and I flew him in. I was like, I need help. So I'm going to teach you how to play my game. You're going to help me demo. And, he has since been immortalized in the game as one of the characters in the expansion.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
That just reminded me of something, but I have like a spacey brain. Your thoughts on, you're like, I need your hot take on like Kickstarter or Indiegogo or things like that. Like, why have you like chosen not to go that route with it?
So I actually did, and it was really poor timing because it was right before COVID. But I'm sorry, it was November of 2020. So everyone was kind of stuck inside already. I started a Kickstarter. It went for about 3 days. I realized that even within the 3 days, you kind of know like the traction, like the trajectory of where it was going. And I would have made the target eventually. Unfortunately, I also got COVID, and I was like, it is so much effort to stay alive and also like be trying to run a thing.
We laugh right now at that, but then
we're
sort of
gonna cancel that.
Yeah.
So that kind of set us back, and afterwards, I promised like the fans who did back it, I was like, we'll be back. I need some time off, but also even just in the comments of that kind of amount of kickstarting of like 3 days was like, well, can it be more than 2 players? And I kept hearing this over and over again. I was like, you know what? I'm sitting here at home in quarantine. Yeah, let's do this. So that, as I said, that's where I kind of took that journey for the next couple of years, to work with Jamie again, get new card art, make a 4-player version, make expansions, make promo packs, and only now I'm kind of getting back out there and saying, all right, it's done. We're going to distribute, and we will do a fundraiser on Kickstarter for the expansion this coming year, which will also allow people who are remote to buy the base game and get everything that that they might have missed from that, not having it done finished the first time.
Yeah. Okay, so I have 1,000 more questions. So, but I do think that I think this is a good pause point. So before we head out, what should like the action be for folks right now if they're like really want the most amazing wizard game in the entire world on their doorstep in the next year? Because you said kind of next year is launch time, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Manufacturing is happening as soon as we confirm like the shipping rates and stuff. So that should probably be. I'm planning to go to PAX Unplugged to like kind of shake hands with my manufacturer's like CEO and be like, we're done, congratulations, we signed a deal, it's being made. From there, it's about 8 to 10 weeks of being in their factory, more time for things to get shipped. So, Q2 of next year, like I should have product to get out to people. And what form that will take immediately, I'm not quite sure. I'm targeting maybe PAX East, because I think it's in May this year, rather than the normal winter time. So trying to hit up the big conventions like PAX Unplugged, won't be able to make Gen Con. You have to go like years in advance to get like a booth.
I was going to say Gen Con seems a little intimidating.
It's a little competitive, but someday, a couple of years from now, we might be getting in there. And then also doing online sales. So, the website, that's wizard.com. There's a sign up for the email there. It's, you'll only be messaged when things are ready to be in your hands, basically. That's my philosophy there, because I personally don't like spam. So that's where we're at.
Cool. Well, thank you, Wisardly, for joining us, and I really appreciate your time, and I cannot wait for your spellbinding cards to grace all of our presence. I think it was really fun. Again, I had a blast playing it, and I love Wizardly things, so it works really well. it's a good combo.
Thank you so much. I look forward to being back and seeing all of your other episodes as well.